Coming up on today's show.
A move, perhaps to a home that is smaller than your current home. If you do not downsize appropriately, you'll have a remainder of unopened boxes that just can't fit anywhere in your new, smaller home.
Okay.
That is a situation that can cause clutter.
How does this affect us, though, as far as being happy or not? I mean,
Think of those folks that might not have a filing system in place or a paper flow system, and piles of paper are everywhere and they can't pay bills or get their taxes in on time. That can affect your stress, which of course can affect your health.
happy home equals happy you. Today on Keeping You Organized. Well, hello, welcome to Keeping You Organized. We hope that you have a happy home because when you do have a happy home, you have a happy you. But we know a lot of people, especially those trying to get organized, sometimes don't feel so happy about it. So we got a solution for you. We're going to bring on Sandra Lane from Organization Lane, a productivity and organizational consultant. Sandra, welcome to Keeping You Organized.
Thanks for having me, John. Great to be here.
And where are you located? What part of the country?
Pittsburgh.
Okay, awesome.
Based in Pittsburgh.
Okay, so we're going to talk about this concept of a happy home equals a happy you, but there's probably some underlying things that we have to talk about as it relates to that. So how are we going to kick off and help people discover the secret to the happy home?
Yeah, I'd like to start off this discussion by having folks recognize the clutter that they have acquired in their home. How did it get there? So just letting them know that there is a method to how this clutter has arrived, and recognizing what it is the first step in remedying it. And there are two categories of clutter that I share with folks. The first is situational clutter, and the second is self-imposed clutter.
Okay, well, let's get into the situational clutter, I guess, first, because how would you, I mean, to me, clutter is clutter, but there obviously are different kinds of clutter. So let's talk about situational clutter.
Sure. So situational is much like what it sounds, a situation or a circumstance, a life crisis, a life event of some kind suddenly puts you in a situation where you are inundated with large amounts of clutter. And some examples to illustrate that: a child comes home after 4 years of college and all of their belongings are on your doorstep.
I think a really good example is last weekend. My daughter came home from college from the house she was at, and she just decided that when she brought everything back with her, she was going to leave it like in this train, starting at the garage door, all the way wrapped around the kitchen and into the living room. And it's like, and her thing was, I'm just so tired.
Well, I know. It's like, isn't it nice to have them back?
Yeah, of course. You know, we overlook it all. We were happy about that, but then I guess my wife wasn't super happy that we had this train. It was piles. It was kind of like a choo-choo train that went around the corner. So I totally understand that one.
Right. So some other examples include a move, perhaps to a home that is smaller than your current home. If you do not downsize appropriately, you'll have a remainder of unopened boxes that just can't fit anywhere in your new, smaller home.
Okay.
That is a situation that can cause clutter.
Okay. Now, there was another kind of clutter. We had situational. What's the other kind?
Sure. The other kind is self-imposed clutter, and this is really based on decisions that we make, and it most often occurs through acquisition.
Oh, okay.
So we are making purchases emotionally rather than the need for an item. So we may be motivated because it's on sale, or it's a buy one, get one free, or your friends are getting it, so you want it too.
Right.
Or we may also acquire a number of things through hand-me-downs. We may get bags and boxes of toys and clothes for family members and our kids, but not really take the time to sort through those and really decide and discern what it is that we need rather than keep everything that was in the bag.
Okay, so we have these two different kinds of clutter. How does this affect us, though, as far as being happy or not? I mean, we have clutter, we have to deal with it. But when it comes to the happy home, how does this relate to that?
Right. Well, there are studies and reports that link the clutter and excess in our life, that overwhelm that really overcomes us, can affect our well-being. If you are happy with your surroundings, it positively affects you, and conversely, it can negatively affect you mentally as well as physically. So here's a few examples. Our focus is really torn between the distraction and disorganization of the clutter in our life, and that can affect us staying focused and our cognition in terms of work or being as productive as we can be at home. And we can increase our stress and anxiety because the clutter is getting in our way. Think of those folks that might not have a filing system in place or a paper flow system, and piles of paper are everywhere and they can't pay bills or get their taxes in on time. That can affect your stress, which of course can affect your health. And weight gain is another potential issue that can certainly happen. You could be so overwhelmed by the clutter in your space that eating is a coping mechanism for you.
I guess I haven't heard that one. I know that people do get stressed out. I mean, that's got to be one of the common things when people call you, right? They're kind of overwhelmed by the whole situation.
Absolutely. And oftentimes they are not necessarily attributing the clutter to any of these health issues that they have. I think we have gotten very, very good in our ways of adapting and adjusting to the clutter in our life. And we make excuses that, oh, it's probably just stress from work, or I'm just too busy, I can't prepare a decent meal.
Right.
Or, I have a bad mattress, so I'm not sleeping well. It is always something else, but it could also be your clutter.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. That kind of causes this vicious cycle then. If someone says, I'm too stressed out to deal with my clutter, but the clutter is what's stressing them out. I mean, how do you break that mold, right?
Right. Well, again, it goes back to recognizing how it is that you've acquired this clutter, and then really examining, could that potentially be the reason that you're not sleeping well, or that you have put on a few pounds, or that you're so stressed that your hair is falling out and turning gray. So yes, those things are definitely linked.
Now, are there any other studies or research behind this, or have we kind of covered most of that?
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered it. I mean, I've got the University of Princeton and the University of California, Irvine. They have done a variety of studies. The University in Mexico have done studies in terms of linking your productivity, your stress, your health, all with clutter and that overwhelm that comes from it.
Well, now our average listener is going to say, okay, I totally agree. I understand. I know there's the two kinds of clutter. I know the studies prove it. I know I'm stressed out. That's how I feel. But then how we're going to deal with it, I think, is what we're going to talk about. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, let's talk about how we kind of tackle it, how we can attack the situation and make it happen. So we're with Sandra Lane from Organization Lane and talking about happy home equals happy you, and we'll be right back. We're back now on Keeping You Organized, talking about a happy home, which equals a happy you, and identifying in the first half of this episode just these concepts of the different kinds of clutter, and then the study, the research that's behind it, that's showing that these are things that really cause us to do things like stress out and gain weight, and but we really need to know how to deal with it. So we're going to bring back in Sandra Lane from Organization Lane. And Sandra, okay, now let's talk about how we actually deal with this. How do we overcome? We've identified the problem. Now let's solve the problem.
So there are Several common challenge areas in a home. They are the typical spots that collect clutter, the entryway, a bedroom, those undefined spaces such as a garage and basement tend to be big storage areas for most folks. So you need to recognize where your clutter problem is and focus in on that area. And I like to break the process down into 3 A's.
The 3 A's. We got to have a list, right?
Yes, I do. The 3 A's: assess, assign, and then acquire.
Okay.
So let's go through each one of those.
All right.
Assess is taking the time to really go through what is in this space that has become such a challenge. That clutter, do you really need it? Sort and edit what you have and then release what no longer serves you. Does it not fit? Is it broken? If it's not being used? These are all questions that you ask yourself so that you can make the decision of whether or not you wish to keep it.
Okay, good. So when you're working with a client, do you do a walkthrough with them, or how do you do it? Or you have a checklist that someone goes through and say, here are the comments areas. How do you suggest someone doing that?
Right. Well, when I work with a client, they will typically call me because they have a specific problem in mind. And then I will physically go to their home to see what they've described to me over the phone. Okay. And we will do an assessment of that space. If they are going to do this on their own, they can certainly do the same thing. They need to recognize where those trouble areas are and basically bring all those items together that are affecting that trouble area and go through that physical sort of those items. Okay. So, for example, in the case of an entryway, if you have clothes, every entryway is different. First of all, every home size is different. So if you've got items that don't really fit or can accommodate the space in that entryway, that is you making an assessment that maybe we can't have my son's hockey bag sit in the entryway. It just takes up the entire space. Mm-hmm. So we need to come up with a plan, and that plan might have to be that he enters through another doorway in the house and drops his hockey bag in the laundry room instead.
Mm-hmm. Got it. All right.
If you want to make accommodations for backpacks and shoes and coats, then you need to assess your space and really decide how much of that you want to keep and can it in fact fit.
Okay. Well, let's go on to the second A then. So we've assessed the situation. We've kind of figured out where these areas are. We've given the son the bad news that he's got to come in the different door. He'll get over it.
Right. So the second step is assign. And this is when you look at what you have left after you've sorted and you've released what you no longer need, and then you assign an appropriate home for those items. Logical places where you would use them, and of course, frequently used items should be within a reasonable reach. Right. So a good example there would be the coffee maker in your kitchen. And the cabinet above it would have the necessary items that you would need to make coffee. Okay. The filter, the coffee grounds, the mugs, the tea bags, etc.
Right. So this may mean reassigning something that's in that cabinet and putting it somewhere else, just trying to get the scope of, the proximity to work out.
Correct. Okay. Exactly. But, the first step needs to happen. The assessment needs to happen first, and then you can assign an appropriate home.
Okay. Great. Anything else on assign, or can we move on to the third A?
Nope, we can move on to the third A.
All right.
The third A is acquire. And this is a critical component that needs to happen last. I think there's a lot of folks that like to do this first because it's fun. We get to do the shopping at all our favorite stores and buy those pretty baskets and boxes and containers. But in order for you to get the appropriate storage container or vessel or tool to hold your item, you need to know how much you have and what size space you will be storing it in. Hence, that's why you do the assessment first, and then you assign, and then you'll know how deep of a container to get. You'll know the depth that you need because you'll know where you'll be placing it. So that acquire refers to getting those storage containers and bins and tools that you need to house and store your items that you plan on keeping.
Plus, when you know where the home is, it kind of helps determine if you need a bin or not, or, maybe it's, something different, some different kind of container or something that maybe the items can just sit there on a shelf too.
Exactly. And you won't know that until you've done those first two steps.
All right. What do you think on a time frame? Like if you're working with someone that's a typical client that's overwhelmed on this, you get them through the assessment. How much time does someone need to allot to this process?
Well, it really depends on the space, what you're going through, and that person. There are some folks that are really plagued by clothes, for example. And then there are some that really take a long time to make decisions about books. So every person has their hot button, and that is what could slow the process down in terms of their decision making and that assessment. So it's really hard to judge. I think it's important that you give yourself more time than you actually need, and recognize that the clutter did not occur overnight, and that the cleanup might not happen overnight. And it's a process. Yeah,
I know some people are probably stressed out and they want maybe a little break in between. Maybe it's a day. But some people probably want to tackle it all in a day, too. It might be challenging. But again, it depends on how big their space is and how much clutter they actually have.
Exactly. And you know what? Some folks may have some attention issues in terms of sticking with it and staying focused. And if they're doing it on their own, working with a timer is a great way to stay as focused as you need to be. Set it for perhaps 30 minutes to 60 minutes, and then give yourself a well-rewarded break of 5 minutes, and then revisit the project and continue your work in terms of assessing or assigning.
Awesome. Well, these have been great tips. We want to give you the opportunity to tell people how they can get a hold of you, the kinds of services that you provide. And you might also put in there, can you do this virtually, or do they have to kind of be in your area?
Yes, no, I can certainly work virtually as well.
Okay.
My website is probably the most connective way to reach me, organizationlane.com. And on the website, I have links to my social media sites. Organization Lane works with residential and business clients to help them clear out the clutter so that they can be more productive in their home, office, and life.
Awesome. Well, we'll have those links in our show notes. And Sandra, thank you so much for joining us. First time on the podcast, and I'm sure we'll have you back.
Thanks so much, John.
All right. Well, there you have it, folks. Now you have the secret to a happy home. It's a happy you. And the secret to a happy you is dealing with that clutter in a logical way using the 3A system. And then after you're happy, come back for another happy episode of Keeping You Organized.